EvoSec Throwback episode.
The Evolution Security Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Evolution Security Podcast. This is Eric and Aaron Davis bringing us in here. How you doing, brother?
Man, doing great. Always fun to hang out, man.
Most certainly. Hey, bro, we need to make sure that we give a shout out to Brian. He is not here for our intro and accountability because he is out flying again. We don't hold anything against him for that because he's doing the work.
That's right, man.
Now, Eric, I was just curious, what does bear mean in 18th century vernacular?
Well, in 18th century vernacular, it means to be able to hold and carry.
Yes, carry. In the Second Amendment, it says keep and bear, right? So we can keep our arms and bear. Why would there be two separate words there in the middle about the arms, keep and bear? Why would you split that up into two words? And especially in the vernacular of the day, bear means to carry. The fact is that as we're recording this, the Ninth Circuit in
Circus.
Yeah, the Ninth Circus Court of Appeals ruled that we do not have the constitutional right to carry a gun concealed or unconcealed. In other words, we don't have the right to carry a pistol to protect ourselves against the most deadly encounters on the street, which is pretty amazing. I don't want to go too deep into this, but it's just amazing that these elites have this attitude that we shouldn't be able to carry, but I guarantee you there's all kinds of security guards keeping people from running in there in their courtroom to attack them. Wouldn't that be correct, Eric?
Oh, yeah, and all I have to say about it is we know that's the type of decisions that come out of the Ninth Circus, but boy, the Supreme Court, they need to take this case up and they need to squash it. I mean, if they're at all constitutionalists in the minor majority, I'll just call it that, they need to do their job and uphold the Constitution because, yes, it was codified in the Constitution that we could keep and bear, carry, and we know the real meaning of the Second Amendment, so definitely we need to see that go to the Supreme Court and get this stuff squashed for sure.
Yes, definitely. Well, that's enough about that. I just wanted to say something about that since that just occurred. So I'd like to mention one of our sponsors, Tenacor. Of course, they make amazing holsters, and I've been loving my Khartoum 3. And Eric, I just have to say, let's just introduce him right now that we have the awesome Kyle Defoor on the show, and he's a big fan of Tenacor, and he's a big fan. I believe he said that his Khartoum 3 was the best holster he's ever had. So pretty cool that he's all behind Tenacor like we are. So just wanted to send you to their website, tenacor.com. And at checkout, make sure you use the discount code EVOSEC so you can get 10% off your order.
Awesome. I'd like to talk about Origin. Go check them out at originmain.com. Just tonight, I wore my Axiom Jiu-Jitsu gi. Man, it feels great to be on. Yeah, legit. It's amazing to be on the mats. I just joined a new gym. Yeah, I mean, it's great to be developing a new family here at a location that's only 20 miles from our new home. So, man, it's great to be there. So, yeah, use EvoSec 10 at checkout. Again, the website is originmain.com. Use that code for 10% off.
Rock on. Yeah, that's good gear.
Well, real quick, Aaron, let me mention that we'd love to have folks go and share our podcast, rate it, and give us a review on iTunes. It drastically helps our podcast bubble up and get noticed within this genre. So please go out there and do that. It helps us greatly.
Yes, please. We'd appreciate it.
With that said, without further ado, let's get to this interview, Aaron.
Sounds great, buddy.
We'd like to welcome Kyle Defoor to the show. How you doing, Kyle?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
Man, wonderful. Awesome.
Awesome, man. It's so cool to meet you and hang out and do this, man. Very cool.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's always it's cool to get the guys that we want to train with and respect as trainers and, follow to come in and chat, because we get to get a little precursor maybe before we do a show or a host or a class, because your classes are pretty cool and seem to sell out pretty quickly, and we'll talk about that later.
Boy, do they.
You gotta be quick, man. It's
yeah,
you have 5 minutes and you may have maybe 50 minutes, but it damn sure don't go more than an hour most of the time.
Well, Kyle, this is Eric again. I have been trying for years. For years.
Try harder.
So, yeah,
It sounds kind of like, when a online site puts some 9mm on there and it's gone in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean it's a good problem to have. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's I guess that means everybody digs it, so that's cool,
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So we kind of do this with everyone, and I don't need to know what hospital you were born at, but why don't you give us take a couple minutes and give us some background of where you're from, maybe where you grew up and how, and a little bit of your path of how you got to where you are now and what you do now.
Yeah, well, the hospital thing is not hard because there was only one in the area I was born in, so. I was born in a town called Haleyville, Alabama. Had the normal, I guess, what you would consider in the 70s and 80s, kind of the normal southern kid, son of the South kind of childhood. Riding motorcycles, three-wheelers back then, of course, because three-wheelers weren't dangerous back then. Yeah. Sports, of course, but fishing, hunting, shooting guns. I mean, that was like a normal way of life for everybody, even like kids that I grew up with. Even if you weren't into guns, you shot guns. You know what I mean? Like, it was a different time and it was a different place. And where I'm from, we don't have a lot, or at the time we didn't have a lot of variety of sports. You played football, or if you didn't like that, you could play football. And that's what you did. We're probably an hour and 15 minutes from Tuscaloosa, where the University of Alabama is. So, I didn't want to go. I did not like the college thing. Was just not my bag. I've told this story before. We had career night, when you're in the 10th or 11th grade, and your class goes and at least for us in the cafeteria, there's all the, some businesses come in and, the military recruiters come in and all that kind of thing. And so started looking at the military, and, the Army dude was there, and I went up to him and I'm like, hey, I want to be a, Green Beret. I didn't even know the word Special Forces. I was just like Green Beret. And this dude was so unimpressive to me. And, not just, I was just like, God damn, that's not. All right, so next, Marine Corps, it's like the Marine Corps type next door, right? So bumped down to that. I'm like, I don't know. And then I get to the Navy dude, and he's like, it's just some chilled out E5 doing his shore duty as a recruiter. he was playing on a little TV, you know, with like the built-in VCR. He was playing the tape, which I know now it was called Be Someone Special, and it's been the SEAL recruiting video from like 1968 to like 1998. It was the same damn video, and I'm watching that. And I'm like, what the hell? You know, what's going on with, you know, a bunch of dudes wearing Levi's, and you know, they got beards and shit, and you know, no uniform is the same. I was like, that's kind of cool. What's that? You know? And he's like, oh, these are SEALs. And I, you know, I'm like, what? You know, again, this is, and for the listener, it's got to be, you got to understand this is pre-internet. So there's no way to like go Google this. As I started doing more research and you know, discovering that this was not an easy task. And at the time I was kind of used to being, you know, take this with a grain of salt, but you know, the big fish in a small pond as far athletically, you know. But then I started looking at like the athletic application for buds, and I was like, holy shit, I can't do any of this, you know. You know, there's a funny story I've told before about, you know, I couldn't swim. I mean, not to SEAL team standards anyway. I mean, everybody thinks they can swim, but then when you start looking at the actual times you need to make with and without fins, and you're like, you know, I didn't even know the stroke. So my mom and dad got divorced right about the same time all this was happening. And I was living with my mom, and, you know, she's like, you know, I know where you can learn to swim. You can learn to swim at the University of Alabama. And I'm like, what? She goes, yeah. And she called down to the university, and, you know, this is like, I tell people all the time, like your mom, you know, helping you out, looking out for you. And she literally called the University of Alabama, called the pool. Basically, she asked the swim coach, "Can you teach, you know, my kid how to do the side stroke?" So I was literally out of school at like noon as a senior, and I would drive from Haleyville to Tuscaloosa every day, about an hour, and go to the university. And there were two coaches down there at the university at the time. I still remember their names to this day: Sonia and Ray, two female coaches. And I walked in the first time and said, "Hey, you know, I'm the kid. My mom called. You know, I need to learn how to do the side stroke." I literally did not know what the side stroke was. We had encyclopedias at my house. I looked it up, and it, you know, didn't really say anything. And this is God's honest true story. That I go in there, and both Sonia and Ray are like looking at each other, and they look at me, and they're like, "Why do you need to know that?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to go in the Navy, and I'm trying to go to this thing called, you know, SEAL team." And she goes, "Oh, buds, you're trying to go to buds." I'm like, yeah. I was like, yeah, that's exactly where I'm trying to go. And she said, "Well, we just had one of our All-Americans just left here. He's in buds right now."
Very cool.
And I'm like, yeah, it was
And
pretty.
you're like, nice. They know what I need.
Yeah.
They know exactly what I need. And for the listener, you know, it's the side stroke, but really in the SEAL teams, we call it the underwater recovery stroke, because we don't keep our head. You know, the underwater recovery stroke is essentially a hybrid between the side stroke and freestyle. And people that know it, but it's faster than the normal side stroke, but it doesn't make as much splashing as freestyle. And they knew exactly how to teach it to me. So I had a huge advantage by the time I got done with those guys, because, you know, by the time I'm rolling to boot camp, I'm pretty, you know, I'm making the times that I need to for the test. So, and I went to boot camp. I graduated in May, and down there in the South, we graduate in May, like mid-May, I think it is. I was at boot camp on June 1st. So, my senior year. So I was 17 when I enlisted. I was 18 by the time I got to buds. I was 18 when I graduated. You know, wearing a trident by the time, I think I turned 19 when I got my trident. But yeah, man, weird things happen like that in life, you know, and I'm forever grateful for that, because swimming is obviously a huge part of that selection.
Yeah. So Kyle, you go to buds. You get out of buds. I kind of like to ask you about some impactful some impactful situations and or times in the teams for you. Can you hit on a few of those?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd be doing a disservice to the listener to not talk about buds a little bit, just simply because impactful times. I almost died when I was out there, so that was pretty impactful.
Oh wow.
I would say the two things. I would separate the career into three categories. I would buds would be a category by itself. The second category would be time in the SEAL teams. And the third category would be, going to selection at Defoor. And then, wartime after that. So the first part of that, I mean, when I got to California, again, I went to boot camp in Orlando. So that was, it was regional back in those days. So if you lived in the South, you went to Orlando. If you lived in the West, you went to San Diego. If you lived in the North or the Midwest, you went to Chicago. So Orlando boot camp for me was, I really loved it, man. I had a great time. I thought it was awesome because that's where all the girls went. Females only went to Orlando. So I was like, man, the Navy's the greatest thing ever. Because there's a bunch of 18-year-old girls walking around, and I'm 18, and like the Navy, yeehaw! I was good with it. I took my screening test for buds. I passed it, and of course, naive me, I just thought, well, I passed it, so I'm good. Like I'm gonna be okay out there. I'm not gonna quit. Blah blah. I went out when I arrived in California. The first thing we did. We classed up, I want to say, somewhere between 160 and 175 people. They gave us another physical test, running, swimming, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups. And at the end of it, we're all standing at attention in this field, and they're like, hey, if we call your name, go get on this bus. So they call these dudes' names. And you didn't really see anybody fail the test. You know what I mean? Maybe like 2 or 3 guys. And but like 20, 25 dudes get on the bus, and they're like, all right. And those dudes leave. And the rest of us that are there, they're like, all right, those guys passed, just so you guys know, but they didn't score high enough. And so,
ouch.
I mean, yeah,
you didn't know that was the guys that were being dismissed.
I had no clue. And again, this is all pre-internet. Like nowadays, you can go on the internet and you're like, okay, they take the competitive test scores, But like back then, you didn't know that. I mean, you showed up, and they tell you, they're like, hey, you better put out as hard as you fucking can. And so like these dudes passed, but they're like, maybe they did 13 pull-ups. The limit, you had to do 10. They did 13, but like the cutoff was 17. Or whatever, I don't know. I can't remember what it was, but that was the first time where I was like, okay, these people they're serious. They're not. This is not a joke, and that was very impactful for me. And I remember like talking to other people in my class and being like, okay, like this is real now. This is not, unless you want to go chip paint on the USS whatever, you gotta have your shit wired the whole time. So that was pretty impactful. We go through buds. Hell Week back then was the 6th week of training. So my class actually we had a lot of people in my class. I want to say about a dozen dudes. When we were in Hell Week, we contracted flesh-eating bacteria, and
wonderful.
Damn.
Yeah, not cool. We lost 3 or 4 guys immediately, as in like they got medically retired from the Navy, and they've only been in the Navy like 4 or 5 months or whatever. But I got it, but I kind of knew something was wrong after Hell Week, but I was like, man, I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to get rolled back to another class, And by the time I go into dive phase, it's so bad that I'm beginning to get an abscess like on my gut, like right below my belly button. And like it's big. It's like an abscess. It's like the size of a golf ball. But the whole time you're out there, you rarely go without a shirt unless you're in the pool. So most of the time you're wearing like a brown t-shirt or whatever. So it's kind of hidden. And, man, I remember the day I was getting a dive supervisor check to get ready to dive. And, we'd been in dive phase for maybe a couple of weeks. And, the instructor, I couldn't tighten my waist belt down on my tanks. We'd not gone to the dragger yet. We were still in twin 80s. And, I couldn't tighten it down because that abscess, I mean, it hurt like hell. And, he's looking at my waist belt, and he's like, dude, basically he's like, hey, Defoor, you're all fucked up, And he grabbed the waist belt and he tightened it down, and I passed out, right when it hit that abscess and kind of went into my stomach.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I remember waking up, and it just so happened that this instructor was a corpsman, and he's like, what the fuck, And he pulls my shirt up and he sees it, and he's like, Jesus Christ. They sent me right to medical, and I was in Balboa. I was in Balboa Hospital like within an hour getting emergency surgery. And so
they were probably worried you had were going septic at
yeah,
some point,
they cut it out
possibly.
on me, and it was running down my right leg. So I ended up being in the hospital for about a week and a half. So obviously I got rolled out of that class, which I was so bummed at, because when I started BUD/S, I was in class 199, and there was a stigma at that time because everybody was like, dude, you do not want to be in a class that starts with a 2, because like the old frogmen are going to be like, not only are you a new guy, but you got a fucking 2 on your class number, like you didn't want to be in class 200. And, I couldn't even class back up in 200. I got rolled through that, and I didn't even class back up until 201. So I ended up graduating with class 201. So that was like a very impactful moment, because the big lessons learned there were like, one, I got into something that obviously, because there was no research material back in those days, like the internet to use, I learned very quickly, okay, this place is serious. Number 2, I learned, how fragile that is. I mean, I was very close to probably not, either having a really bad health problem, or, or just getting kicked out because they didn't want to put up with me. But anyway, ended up graduating with 201, and class 201. I think we graduated 20 guys total. But I want to say 8 or 9 of us were from 199, because we were all the guys that were so screwed up from the flesh-eating bacteria. So it was
wow.
Yeah, welcome to the States.
Do you remember how many started in 201?
Oh man, I don't know, because I rolled into that class. But I mean, back then they were all starting 160, 170 guys per class ish. So I mean, wow. it's the attrition
really high attrition rate. Yeah,
it's always been somewhere between 70 and 80%.
That's crazy. It's funny because I've always, I know about BUD/S. I've heard about it. I've heard other people's stories. I didn't realize the attrition rate was that high, because I'm just thinking about, I don't want to be the guy that rings the bell. By the time you're graduated, you're tired of hearing that bell ring.
Oh yeah, it's hilarious. I mean,
man,
there's dudes that, I mean, I can remember, I would say another thing to segue off the first piece there, like the PT test when I got there. When I got out there, I was under the impression that I was, a decent athlete, again, Mr. Kid from Alabama, got a little success under his belt, blah, blah. But I got out there and I was like, it painfully obvious that I was not the best runner, not even close. I was not the best, and I was well under 6-minute miles at that point. I was not the best swimmer, I was middle of the pack, best case in swimming my entire time there. The best way, and I've told guys this in past interviews, the best way to describe BUD/S is, it is the best dude in every high school that you know of, that they're all going to the same fucking place. That's who's out there. I mean, it like ridiculous.
Jeez. No, good. I mean, it's interesting to hear that backside of it. And I imagine it's very similar now, but I imagine that they have PC'd it a little bit, probably from outside pressure. We hope that stuff does not get distilled, honestly. We were talking about that earlier this week.
Dude, I can talk about that, man. I mean, one of my best friends just retired, and
Yeah.
his last, he wanted to be a buds instructor before he retired, and he went out there. And according to him, dude, he said, bro, he goes, I would not want to go through right now. There's no way. Because
Nice. It's good to hear that,
yeah,
honestly.
it's so competitive now that, I mean, like the dudes the guys that are showing up there are specimens, man. They are,
Yeah.
and the Navy has tried, for years and years and years. They've done every possible thing that you can imagine to try to up graduation rate, and it's never worked. That's the thing, is they do all this shit, and there was a time in the GWAT where, and we heard about this. They're like, hey, they're going to get rid of winter hell weeks to try to up graduation rate, and we're like, of course, God forbid the kid who comes through who like didn't go through a hell week because he, his buds class was like mine, and that didn't work. They tried the triathlete recruiting for a while. That didn't work. The Navy spent $3 or $4 million for 3 or 4 years in a row going to the X Games and recruiting athletes from the X Games to go to buds. That didn't work. It's different than Ranger School, and it's different than SF selection, and it's different than all the other things, because it's so, number one, it's so damn long. It's 7 months long, 6 months of training, then 1 month of pre. And then the water, dude. I mean, that water is like, it is, and it's not just the cold, it's just the stuff you got to do in the water. I mean, we lose as many people in pool comp and in dive phase as you do pre-hell week in first phase, just because, people, instructors are tying your hose in a knot, and you got to not freak out and do the proper procedures to get out of that, like simulating a dive problem. And, yeah, man, it's not a joke, dude.
And also that it's likely that it's and I may be wrong on this, that it's the mental side more than anything else, and no amount of physical preparation is going to prepare the guys for dealing with their mind. Am I wrong in that?
I mean, yeah, that's. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is that, if we could figure out a test to give a guy to see if he's got the mental, we wouldn't have to put a guy through buds, right? You wouldn't have to put a guy through Ranger School. You wouldn't have to. But the thing is that, it's that attitude we're looking for. I mean, and you see it developed in the guys. I would say by the time dudes are probably halfway through buds, they have the attitude that we're looking, and as sad as it is, and listen, listeners don't need to look at this as like, I'm saying this is a good thing, because it's not good in some cases in life. But, by halfway through buds, we know that guys have that attitude where they're so hard that it doesn't matter what you put in front of them. They're going to be like, yeah, whatever, dude. Hey, we need you to do this. Yeah, they're like, yeah, whatever. They don't, and that's that attitude we're looking for, whether, no matter how cold they are or how tired they are or how, whatever, it takes it. I think the military as a whole, man, there's just no other way to do it besides do it. We joke a lot of times about like humping a rucksack. We joke about that to guys all the time, because, you're like, how do you get good at humping a rucksack with weight in it? Well, you hump a fucking rucksack. You know what I mean? You can go and lift in the gym all you want. You can go and run all you want. You can ride your bike all you want. It's not the same as carrying weight on your back.
Well, and Kyle, if I can interject in that, back in my Army days, I would think, oh, I'm in shape right now. I don't need to go ruck before the 12-mile test, and man, I paid for that one time, but every time after that, I was rucking before, just preparing for it. It was silly young guy in me that thought I didn't need to. Yeah, you have to ruck for sure.
So that's kind of, I mean, that would be the first, like, I would say, big thing in the SEAL teams that I learned. I mean, the second thing, my time in the teams, I came to the East Coast. I was kind of like, I put that on my dream sheet. I wanted to go to 2, 4, or 8. I just wanted to get out of California. And I came to SEAL Team 8, and I did about a little over 4 years at Team 8. And, that was, the second part of it, just learning the job, learning that there's always things to learn, right? You're never as good as you think you are. And, it takes, back in those times, I would say even right now, I would say it probably takes 5 to 7 years to make a good frogman, and that nobody wants to hear that because they're like, God dang, but by the time you figure everything out, you've done all the jobs, you've done a few deployments. Those are some hard lessons learned, and that's years, man. That's, I did three deployments prior to 9/11. And, I learned something on every one of them, and that was, that was hard stuff, and in doing, what we called real world stuff pre 9/11, which was not a lot, but, not compared to post 9/11, but, what the stuff we were doing in Bosnia, I did a couple of pumps there, did a couple of real world shipboardings. Nothing dramatic, but, that was another, big lesson learned is learning the job and seeing the world and realizing that, just because you went through this selection course doesn't mean that you're that good at your job yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, Kyle. And, I was not in special operations, so I don't have any direct experience with it, but I understand fully what you're saying. And I've heard other SEALs. We've had JP Donnell was on our show, and he spoke on that as well. It's like, hey, you get through buds, but you really don't learn the job until you're on the job.
Yeah.
So, but now, so as far as post 9/11, was there anything, any deployments or impactful situations post 9/11?
Yeah, we were, I was already at Dev Group prior to 9/11. I went through stuff there in 2000.
Okay.
So I had been there for, almost 2 years. And, post 9/11, I would say our biggest lessons learned by the time we got to Afghanistan were it's nice to have these tactics, but we were training and fighting on tactics from a war that was not Afghanistan. It took us a while to figure out, and honestly, they didn't even perfect it until way after I left. But you're what you think you're gonna, what tactic you think is gonna work, and then you don't know because it's not Vietnam. We're not in the jungle. We're not doing 15 and 20-yard firefights. In a wet maritime type setting. We're in the mountains and we're in the high desert, and most of it's at night on nods. So huge lessons learned. What I would call SOP development post 9/11, really beginning right after 9/11 when the first guys started going over there. And I would say that those lessons and those SOPs were not solidified. I left in 03, 04. I would say the guys were at their best by 07, 08, 09, somewhere in there. Call it 08, I guess, if you want to call it middle. By 08, they've got shit wired to the point where it's good. But, now what's going to happen on the next one? Where are we fighting the next one at? You know what I mean?
Just out of curiosity, Kyle, where were you based out of in Afghanistan?
Oh God, I was.
Where weren't you?
I did work out of Kandahar, Bagram, Gardez, Daewoo, Kaust. I was real everywhere, especially early on.
It
Say
does sound
again?
like, yeah, yeah, it does sound like you
You
were
know, you got to
in a lot of
understand
areas.
I don't think a lot of the FOBs they were not hard established when I was there. And I didn't do a hell of a lot of time there. I mean, I've got buddies that, you know, they deployed every year from '01 to 16. You know, just ponder that for a minute.
Well, Kyle, man, I think we're going to have you back on here because we got a lot of stuff to talk about. We definitely don't want to breeze over your time in the service because you know that's obviously what's made you into who you are and what you're bringing to the table with your training company. And if you don't mind, I'd like to move into that because I think that's where you're impacting so many people now, both civilian, law enforcement, and military. I'd have to admit, again, I've not had the chance to train with you. I've been trying for years. It's just the way that it shook out because I'm on the road so much myself. I'd really like to kind of give you props because I mean you've influenced all three of us for many years. I mean, I remember following you from the very beginning when you kind of came out into the open, and I think you're doing wonderful things in the industry. But I just wanted to kind of give you props on. I mean, you're bringing people to a new standard. I wanted to put that out there.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, I'm trying to. I mean, yeah, at this point, man, I mean, I would definitely consider myself more of a professional shooter and trainer than a frogman because I've been doing that longer than I was a SEAL. So yeah, I mean, you know, I've kind of learned along the way. I mean, we train, you know, my company trains a lot of people, man. We do, you know, 90% of our business is mill. Um, and I've learned a lot along the way. I just, you know, and the thing is, I try to tell people this, and I don't know if it goes in one ear out the other, but I just hit it lucky. You know, I only did 10 years in the SEAL teams. Got out, and I got out at a time where, you know, we had a two front war going on. I had a little bit of experience to where I could train dudes, and I'm getting, you know, the biggest thing is I'm getting real, you know, for 10 plus years, man, I've gotten real world feedback from these guys. And so I can adjust training to suit what they're seeing over there. And even open enrollment classes see that, you know, whether it be, you know, the scoped rifle stuff or the carbine stuff or, you know, like the just, you know, shooting nobody shot bulls fast until I came along. You know, when I started, you know, you shot a bullseye NRA B8. You shot it 10 rounds in 10 minutes. And, you know, it took me a few years, but I was like, man, this is fucking ridiculous. I mean, what are we doing here? I don't need 10 minutes to get this score, you know? I mean, obviously, you know, that's a lot of time on the range. That's a lot of time training people, but you know, being able to figure out how to give guys a quick turnaround and being, hey, now we can skin that pistol and we can shoot 10 rounds under 20 seconds and get the same darn score we're going to get whether we take 10 minutes or 20 seconds. You know, that's a huge advantage for guys. And if you can get a guy to do that, by the time you get him up to 7 yards or 5 yards where most pistol engagements happen, I mean, dude, it's a joke. It's like lifting heavy, you know. It's not hard. So yeah, there's been some things that I mean, this is one, but you know, there's the other stuff that you know, I think it's just I feel very blessed and very fortunate to have experienced the things I've done, you know, and being able to give it to other people, you know.
Well, mentioning you're talking about like the 10-minute deal, that's you know, when you think about that, it's just an extraordinary amount of time to do what we usually do. Obviously, if we're following any of your drills in a much shorter time, but even looking at like, you know, some of your carbine tests, you know, there's 3 minutes on, you know, your carbine test one. I feel like that's half of that is the skill and half of it is managing your time.
Oh yeah.
Where do you spend the extra time and where do you push, you
Yeah.
know?
And then like like simple stuff that like a competitive shooter knows, but like, and that's that whole thing. I tried to bridge the gap between competition and quote unquote tactical, because when I came in the industry, tactical guys are like, oh, I just gotta make the shot, and I'm like, hey, bro, like, you need to make it fast. You know what I mean? Like, you can,
Right.
but like, I mean, and as you get closer, that's what you're talking about with that test. Number one, especially, as you get closer, you should shoot faster, and you can watch me do it on video. I mean, but a lot of people don't know that, and put in a high heart rate. I mean, that was another thing is I started doing those tests. I started putting running in there because running was the only thing where on the range we could get a guy to a heart rate where it would somewhat replicate, possibly what's happening in real world. And
Right. Adding a stressor.
right. I mean, again, and I don't want to sound like like a dick, but before I came along, nobody's doing that. And I leave those tests up on YouTube and on my website because, well, first off, I mean, without giving the names of the units away, there are multiple military units who use those tests as their pass fail to this day, especially carbine test 2 and 3, especially the 200 yarder. That test has been around for a long time. And that one's legit, dude. And the carbine hack wall right now is being used by some pretty serious players right now. And I actually had their CO email me one time years after I trained him, and he goes, "I just want to let you know I am the commanding officer of this unit now, and this is the shooting test we're giving guys." And it takes fucking 14 seconds. And
Yeah.
that's the
And
thing.
they don't get a hat. They go home if they don't do it.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't those dudes, but they're like, "Hey, man, we don't need to take a 60-round shooting test." I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. You don't. Because if a guy can do this, I promise you at 10 or 15 yards, he can burn it the hell down." You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm proud of that. I mean, if there's anything I've left, for in the shooting world, I'm proud of those things because, I mean, unfortunately, I can't, raise the flag about who's using it and who's doing that and all. But here's the deal, man. That stuff's there. It's on the internet. People can go on my website and look at it, and they can do it or not do it. And, everybody knows the deal, man. It's like, everybody's like, "Yeah, I've passed your hack wall." And I'm like, "Okay, well, now it's raining and the wind is blowing in our face. Now do it." You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
that's all you got to do is add one modifier to it, or like with some of the mill guys I train and LE at this point, hey, let's do it with nods on and lasers.
Yeah. No, some of the guys they work out with in my CrossFit gym are former military, and they're like, "Hey, let's shoot a drill, and then let's do 15 heavy cleans and shoot it again."
Yeah,
It's like, "Hey, let's go actually physically tax ourselves heavily."
Yeah.
And then see what we can do. And it's good to know, because if you know that your skill level drops a certain percentage when you're stressed, that's going to be in your mind when you're thinking about making a shot.
yeah,
You're going to make sure that shot counts. And it's something that you become accustomed to, because, just like you're talking about learning in the field when they're adapting, you have to do that for real to know what it feels like. You can't just be like, "Oh, I'll be good when the time comes." That don't play.
yeah. That's right. That's right. And here's the other thing you get byproduct of that is that and I'll be straight up with you. When I started doing fast bullseyes at 25 yards, and you got to remember, I shot a Glock for my entire professional career until this year. I'm shooting a staccato now, and that's simply because one, I believe in the staccato pistol, but two, I was like, man, I don't want to do my whole career shooting one pistol. You know what I mean? I shot a SIG 226 when I was in the teams, shot a Glock professionally 10 plus years. I was like, I need to switch it up. But now look at the competition that's happening when I started, when dudes were like, "You can't do that with a Glock." I mean, I literally had, and I mean, I'm not going to name the dudes, but I had two guys very well known who were like, "You can't do this because people aren't going to be able to do it." I'm like, bro, I've got civilians in open enrollment classes getting hats every weekend that I do an open enrollment. So don't, you can't. Yeah, they can do it. It's just, can you teach them how to do it? That's that's what it comes down to, and that in itself has bred a little bit. There's other dudes in this industry that are doing stuff that are like, they're, I hope, I guess in my jealous, um, self-centered way, I hope that I influenced them a little bit. But there's guys that are adding to it now. I mean, and that's good. That's not bad. That's not bad for the LE guy, and that's not bad for the mill guy. As long anything that those guys can get that's an advantage is freaking huge. And now you look at it. I mean, we got the red dots, right? I mean, we're pretty much at the age where the red dot is. We're kind of getting there, man. We're like, it's like, dude, if you ain't got one, you better hurry up because it's coming. You know what I mean?
Well, Aaron, didn't you have something to say about that?
Oh yeah, definitely. You're perking my ears, Kyle, because I being 47 and I've always had fairly bad vision, but of course, getting older, it's gotten worse. So finally, I decided to go ahead and get a Glock MOS 17 and put a Vortex Venom on it. And I am blown away by my performance increase. And more than anything, it just negated my vision issues, I feel like, for the most part, and then allowed me to manipulate the pistol with my grip and my trigger press like I really knew how to do, but it was just the difficulty of my eyes and irons hold me back a little bit.
Oh man, yeah. So dots on a pistol. I mean, first off, it's like I blame my buddy Chuck Pressburg for most of this, because when he came out with the Roland Special, the internet lost its mind, right? The funny thing is that SOCOM wide, most guys had been running some type of dot on the gun, not because of what we're doing now with just all around shooting, but because it was the only way we could transition to the pistol under nods. There was no other way to do it. I mean, so guys have been running, J points and Dr. Optics on pistols for, oh my God, man, I would say 15 years ish. So, but now that we have them where they're actually quote unquote good. And when I say good, I mean, like, there was a time where guys would show up with a certain RMR and I'd be like, hey man, like, that's cool, but it's going to break. And we're leaving that era now. So what I tell guys is that there's a couple things with the RMRs. If you have an eyesight problem like what you're describing, man, you'll take a guy who, before he got a red dot on his pistol, let's say he's shooting a 60 or a 65 at 25 yards on a bull. Because we have to have some type of metric that's universal, right? He puts the red dot on, and now that dude's shooting 90s. You can't argue with that. And now that we have red dots that are actually, quote unquote, duty grade, now it's like, man, it's just like, there is no reason to not be on it. I mean, it's what I tell guys now is if you're old enough to remember this, when I came to the SEAL teams, red dots were kind of still sketch on the carbine. It was like you had an aim point 5,000. It would work most of the time. It had a hearing aid battery. It was kind of like, it was sketch. Okay, then we get the first generation, the EOTech, like the 512 or whatever it was. Better. but it had battery issues as well. Okay, then we get the aim point, we get like the Comp M2 or whatever. Okay, now we got something that basically won't break, but it's got a shitty on-off switch. Okay, then a few years later, we get like an EOTech with like an N-type battery, no battery issues. Then we get an aim point that it doesn't have a knob issue, and blah, blah, blah. So it took, call it 5 to 7 years to get a red dot on a carbine that works. Well, now it did take longer with the pistols, I will admit. I mean, any of the pros will tell you. I mean, we were all pulling our hair out because every time one would come out, we run it, and then 6 months later we break the damn thing, or we bump into something or whatever. But now these red dots on pistols, they do the one thing of helping people with bad vision, of course. But the other thing they do is they help people with performance, both speed and accuracy. I mean, there's just no denying it. You're turning a pistol into, if a guy was a 25-yard guy with a pistol with irons, he's a 50-yard guy with a red dot, easy. And he's probably a 100-yard guy with a red dot, to be honest with you. If he's got good training behind him, that's massive. You cannot deny that. So you've got the night vision thing. We can shoot it under nods passively. You've got the thing with any human who's got bad eyesight. And I'll tell you something that's cool is like open enrollment classes. I have, older people, women and men, they're older. They're whatever, 60, 65. And they're like, they've put a red dot on there. Like, oh my God, I can actually enjoy this again. I enjoy target shooting. Like, rock on, dude. You got that aspect. The other aspect you have is that with LE and MIL, and this is something that's missed with a lot of people, is that when you have a red dot, the shooter can actually target focus the entire time. And that in itself, for a law enforcement officer, think about that. He can target focus instead of looking at his front sight, And if we're talking over the listener's head a little bit, I'll give you the Reader's Digest. If you have iron sights, the only way you can shoot iron sight is you're going to have to look at the sight in some capacity. Front sight or the front and rear sight together, depending on the distance you're shooting at, which means that at a split second, the target could change what it's doing. It could drop the gun. It could drop the knife. It could pick up another knife, whatever. Well, with a red dot, we don't have to worry about that. The shooter can stay target focused the entire time because we superimpose the red dot onto the target. That is the reason that, in my opinion, like every cop in the United States should have red dot on his gun. Period. I mean, done. It's not. It shouldn't even be a discussion at this point. There's two or three out there that and there's getting to be one or two where they don't even have to worry about the maintenance on them that much. So now,
yeah, that brings us to a point where I was wanting to ask you. Maybe there's those top two, or what optics would you recommend? Because it's really weird. It seems like there's more talk about red dots in the last couple of months. I may be just because I got one, I'm listening, but would you mind giving some recommendations?
No, I mean, and so I'm going to preempt it with this. I don't have a dog in the fight. As far as a red dot company goes, here's what I'll tell you. If you're a cop or you're a mill guy, I would tell you that you go with a closed emitter, because a closed emitter is going to make it so that, and I don't want to take too much time because you can go into, you can Google it and get, dudes have already done 20-minute videos on it, but a closed emitter is going to be maintenance wise and use wise is going to be easier for you. And basically what a closed emitter means, I'm trying to think of a way to make this easy for the listener. The back of the red dot, the lens closest to your eye is quote unquote flush. That would be a kind of a generic way to call it a closed emitter. So your two closed emitters that you can look at, the Aimpoint Acro would be one. It would probably be the first one that came out that was like, okay, it's a closed emitter. So, I know a lot of people will talk about, well, if it gets water in it, I mean, I'll be 100% honest with you. I was shot in the rain. In fact, my last pistol class was a complete and utter shit show for 2 days of shooting in the rain. And I did not have a closed emitter, and I still had no problem shooting 90s at 25 at speed. But a closed emitter, durability-wise, maintenance-wise, a little bit better. So the two you got, the Aimpoint Acro and the Holosun 509. Those are the two right now that are your two leading choices. From my experience and from the experience of the guys that either work for me or the guys who are in my tribe who do the same thing I do, I would choose the Holosun 509. The Aimpoint is the killer for the Aimpoint is the battery life. The battery life of what they advertise is on a setting that it's so low that it's not really that usable in a lot of situations. So when you bump it up, you're looking at probably changing the battery every 6 weeks. Now, most people would go, well, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is that a cop or a military guy who, you got to take your lowest common denominator of both of those units, and he's not going to do that, or he's going to do it not regularly or whatever. Whereas when you look at the Holosun 509, you've got a higher battery life. It has a backup solar power feature on it. So if the battery does go bad, you've still got a little bit of juice left in it because it'll run off the sun and charge itself. External battery replacement, which is huge. You don't have to remove the optic off the slide to replace the battery. Those are things that are just absolutely cool.
External on off. You don't have to reach inside the lens to do it. That's
correct. Everything's on the outside. Both of those are made to where, and again, for the listener that might be new to this, I'm trying to generic this so you understand it. Essentially, think of the Acro and the 509 both basically being like you could put them on a Picatinny rail. You know what I mean? Even though they do not share the same exact mounting plate, quote unquote. Like if you got a mounting plate for an Acro, a 509 will not fit on it. It looks like it will, but it won't. And both of those you can actually use with a Glock MOS. You're going to have to buy some aftermarket parts, and the reason I say that is when you look at law enforcement in the United States, obviously the Glock is still the number one LE gun, and most of those guys department wise are going to have to go with an MOS plate because that's just the way that it's going to be logistically and supply wise available to them. And the Holosun 509 you can put on an MOS plate, and the only, I guess, thing that I would say bad about either one of those is you're going to have suppressor height sights as iron sights for a backup. But of those two, I would pick the Holosun 509 all day. And funny enough that I'm saying this now, and I don't even own one. I actually have a Holosun 507 simply because it more matches, the small pistol that I carry, which, the 507 is a little skinnier. It's easier to conceal, when I'm carrying appendix or whatever. The 509 is a little bit bigger. It's not too bad, but I think what you're describing when you were saying like the last couple of months you've seen stuff or whatever. Here's what you gotta realize is that Holosun is like the bastard child of this whole optic thing right now on pistols, and they're making shit that's so good and so affordable that basically a lot of people are getting a little bit butthurt. I mean, that I can't put it any other way. Yeah, and I'm telling you, and I tell guys in my classes all this now, the reason you want to get on this train, especially now, is because I don't see Holosun as a company, I don't see them stopping anytime soon. And at this point, they're going to end up making it so that if you don't have a red dot, like 2 years ago, man, I was teaching class, open enrollment class, you'd have maybe, I don't know, of a dozen people, maybe you got 7 or 8 iron sights, and you got the rest red dots. Okay, now a year ago, maybe it's, almost half and half. Now it's getting to the point where it's like, 3 or 4 iron sights and everybody else is red dot. The problem with that is, and the point I'm getting to is that standards wise, as far as speed and accuracy goes, I can't regulate the class based on 1 or 2 dudes. You know what I mean? Like if everybody's got a red dot except for 1 or 2 dudes, I'm going to have to start doing the stuff that I can do with red dots, which is grossly further and faster. I mean, it's just not even a comparison. So that's what I kind of tell guys when I say, hey man, you need to get on that red dot train. Like, now's the time. So if there's somebody out there listening and they're like, okay, what should I do? I would go with a 509 right now, or a 507, or a 407 from Holosun. The 407 is a single dot, like an aim point, like just a dot. The 507 has 3 options on it. You can get a dot, you can get an EOTech type reticle, which is a circle with a dot in it, and then you can get just a circle. So you can scroll through and choose which one you want. Same on the 509. So that's kind of where I'm at right now in, March of 2021. And then that might change. Hey, that in 6 months that could change, but right now that's kind of where it's at.
It's interesting because I've always, like Savage or Taurus, I'm not going to talk down about them. They make fine weapons. They're not for me. This is how I felt about Holosun 6 months ago. The stuff I've seen, not only from you, but from other guys coming out about the quality, durability, and how well they work for the cost, I just cannot fault them, man. And, I got expensive optics. I got Trigis. I got Night Force. I got, all that stuff. But I got to tell you, this is for anybody, they're the price point that anybody can afford as well. And they are quality products. I cannot fault you for saying that. And it is interesting because it is a real reversal of my, attitude towards the company originally, because, when they were first coming out, I'm like, oh, great. Here's another, knockoff Chinese, optic manufacturer, but that's not what they're doing. They're making a quality product.
Right. And here, and you just said the word, like here's the elephant in the room. It's made in China.
Yeah.
I
know.
and here, and like, I don't know how well you guys know me, but like, I'm the dude who, like, I'm so made in America. I mean, I try to use, and I've done it. I did it years ago.
Yep.
When there was no Facebook and Instagram, when back when I started, this is funny. Like, we had a Google blog. You didn't have Facebook and Instagram because it wasn't around yet. And I've always tried to use as much USA made stuff as possible. My pants are from Prometheus Design Works. My boots are either from Westco or Thorogood. My rifle is from BCM. I mean, I'm shooting a Staccato now. It's made in Texas. I really try right now, dude. I just bought a Toyota Tundra. I mean, you know why? Because the Toyota Tundra is the most made in America pickup that there is. It's not even, you can't even question it.
Wow.
It is 100% made in San Antonio, Texas. So and listen, I had 3 F-150s and a Dodge Ram before this, and I put almost 200,000 miles on every one of them. And every one of them caused me nothing but pain and discomfort after 100,000. So there's people who are like, fuck Holosun, it's made in China. Well, here's what I told a dude on my Instagram the other day. That's exactly what he told me, essentially. He's like, yeah, fuck Holosun, it's made in China. I'm like, what are you typing this message on?
Yeah.
Because whatever you're typing it on, computer or phone, it ain't made in America. So there's got, at a certain point, you hit the nail on the head. The price point that Holosun is coming in on, and the performance that they're giving you. And listen, this is not just me talking. Take a look around at professional shooters. I mean, I can name you 2 or 3 right now that run Holosun. And the reason we're running them is because they don't break. And if we can't break them with the amount of students we're training and the amount of rounds we're shooting, that's you got to look at that, man. I mean, hopefully, now here's what I hope. I hope that the American companies go, hey, we better get on our horse and make a product that's comparable price wise and performance wise.
Yeah.
And if they do, I'll jump on it in a heartbeat. No problems. I'm on it. But I don't see that right now. It's just not there.
Yeah. No, I'm friends with several competitive shooters and sponsored guys that are getting free optics who send their optics back 2 or 3 times a year because they fail. And they just give them a new one, but you don't want that to happen in the middle of a match or the middle of a gunfight.
Well, and even here's a more for realistic for me. I don't want to tell a guy who just spent $675 to train with me for 2 days to go buy this, and then it breaks on him in 6 months, and his wife's like, "Okay, let me get this straight. You paid $700 to go train with this and then you bought this, and it broke, and you got to buy another one." Like, you know what I mean? Plus all the 9mm that you just bought, which is $1.50 a round right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not even responsible on my part. And listen, and I've had this talk with Vortex. I shoot for Vortex. Now, I will tell you, as far as scopes go, I don't think there's anybody in comparison to them. They're not quite there on the pistol red dot yet, but I mean, I shoot a hollow sun right now, man. I mean, it is what it is. You got to be. That's an entire podcast by itself, is professional shooters and guys that are getting out like myself that have a little bit of real world experience. And, that's a problem, right? Guys get out and then a company says, "Hey man, shoot this gun or this optic. We're going to give them to you for free." And then that guy gets on the internet and goes, "This is the greatest thing in the history of sliced bread," but it's really not the greatest thing in the history of sliced bread. And, he's got all his followers or whatever doing that. So I've made a real concerted effort in my career. That's why I have on my website partners. Under the partners heading on the website, when you scroll under it, I can 100% stand by everybody that's on there. 100%.
Nice.
Like, it's not,
nice.
I mean, dude, it's BCM, it's staccato, it's Tenacore holsters. It's, it's Cry Precision. There's nobody on there that I have to worry about a student or a gov unit or a military unit going, "Well, I bought it because Kyle said so, and now it's shit." That's not going to happen, dude. Not going to happen. Not with me.
Excellent.
Well, Kyle, if I can interject on the Holosun, interestingly enough, I have been thinking about the red dot optic for my pistol shooting because, and I think Aaron alluded to this, both he and I have some big vision challenges now, and it has affected me in my pistol shooting. What I'll say is that one of my gifts to myself, I just did a short trip to Iraq this last year, and a gift to myself, Brian hooked me up. He's a former dealer, and we built a 300 blackout pistol, AR pistol that is, an 8.5, and I've got a Holosun 507C on it. I think I'm going to be pulling that off. My brother suggested me milling my slide for my new Gen 519, and I think I'm going to pull that off and place it on that pistol.
I mean,
especially with your endorsement.
Yeah, and I can interject too. That just today, I was thinking about buying a new Gen 519 MOS, but I thought today, I've got a 19 that has just been my carry gun, and it's not got a lot of mileage on it. Man, I'm just going to have it milled and get a 507C myself. So it's just funny and that to have this conversation.
Well, here's another thing, like with the red dot thing that is kind of, there's a lot of guys switch to a dot, right? And there definitely is a training curve, if you want to call it that. But to flatten that curve out, get your slide milled correctly. I'm telling you, it drastically drastically cuts down on the training time as far as converting from irons to a dot. And what I'm getting at is that, you know, if your dot is pretty high off the slide, then there's going to be a little bit more of a training time into it. If you can get the dot lower into the slide, there's less training time. And that's what's the interesting thing. Like I've turned a couple of units onto the staccato, because the cool thing what they're doing is Dave Dawson, who's like, you know, that guy's been in the industry forever. He's the guy that's cutting irons and, you know, the plates and doing a lot of the milling and the precision work for staccato. And he has basically come up with a rear plate system on the staccato to where it's milled so deep, you know, the plate that you screw onto the top of the slide, it already has an iron sight on it. So like if you just think about this, the gun that you guys see me shoot, that's like all over my Instagram, probably for the last, say, few months or so, it's a Holosun 507K on a staccato C2. That gun has standard height iron sights as backups in the lower third of the window.
Nice. That's encouraging.
So, I mean, just think about that. Like, so what's my, you know, my vision as far as switching? It's not that different, dude. It's like, it's just not a big deal. Now, if you don't have that, and that thing is like, you know, I'm trying to think of like, what would be the extreme example the other way? I'm trying to think here. Give me a second. Like a Beretta 92, for example, because a Beretta 92, you can't go into the slide that deep, right? Mill-wise, the metal's just not there. It's just design-wise, that pistol, you just can't do it, right? You're going to end up with a red dot that's super, super high. It's dramatically different. And I'm really talking about a dude who's like, you know, if he did 20 years in the Army shooting a 92 Foxtrot, iron sights, and then all of a sudden he's going to put a red dot on there, it's a lot different for him. So I try to get mine as deep into the slide as I can. On the Glocks, I use a company out of Detroit called ATEI. They do an outstanding job of milling. And same thing, I've got an aim point acro on a Glock 19, and I use stock height iron sights as the backup. And they, you know, it doesn't matter if my dot goes down or whatever. I'm shooting the way I've shot for, you know, ever. It's not that big a deal. So that might help people out a little bit, you know, as far as like making decisions on what they want to spend money on and the turnaround as far as converting from irons to a dot.
Well, Kyle, I just wrote a note about that. You said it's ATEI is the company?
Yeah. The dude that owns that company. So, you know, I can talk about Detroit for an hour if you want, but my wife was born and raised in Detroit. So I've got a lot of family in Detroit. We go back there, you know, a few times a year. The guy who owns ATEI, I can't remember if he worked for GM or Ford. I can't remember, but he was like a machinist for one of the two. And, I mean, this guy's like a wizard when it comes to milling slides. I mean, just like, you just send him your slide, just, you know, packaged up, send it in the mail, tell him what you want. You can actually order it online, drop down menu, pick out what you want. Send your slide in, you know, 4 or 5 weeks later, you get it back, and it is bomb proof, man. And the other thing, you know, you're talking about the top two, like, again, that the way the Acro and the 509 mount, you know, they come in from the side, they clamp from the side, you know, akin to like you would mount something on a Picatinny. So he's essentially, I guess, if you want to really generalize this, he's basically setting it up so that he's almost milling a Picatinny rail into the back of your slide, but it's really low. Just outstanding piece of work, man. I mean, and there's another dude that does it too, and I can't remember his name right now, but I don't know the guy, and I can't remember the company that does it as well. It's slipping my mind right now, but you know, that helps out a lot, man. It really does. And here's the other thing: it helps out with concealment. You know, if you can have a red dot not sticking off the slide so much, and if you can have a small red dot, which again, Hollow Sun is they're kind of ruling the roost on that because all of their red dots are really tiny. They're dramatically smaller than everything else. You can get a good setup, man. I mean, I've got a buddy of mine in Maine. He runs a Glock 43X with a Hollow Sun 407 on it, and I'm telling you, because the red dot is essentially the width of the slide, and the way he's got it milled, it barely sticks off the gun. And if you think about that, most people would think, okay, Glock 43X, you got 10 round mag, okay, not decent amount of ammo or whatever, but you could go with like a Shield Arms mag and you could plus that up. And now you put that red dot on it, dude, you can do some work with that thing. And by the way, I've ran that combo before, and I've ran it in classes in front of students. I mean, multiple witnesses, hundreds of witnesses, and I've made every standard I have.
Awesome.
With a 43X.
I remember you doing.
So,
I remember
nice.
you doing the 43X. Yep.
Yeah, I ran one for about a year.
That's awesome. Well, I think we're getting pretty close to needing to shut it down here, Kyle. Man, this is amazing information. So I want to move into a couple of fun questions before we shut out. The first question I have is, what kind of beer do you keep cracking open?
Dude, I'm on like my second Miller Lite right now. You gotta drink Miller Lite.
Living the high life. Living the high life.
Yeah, man. My pops. My dad's nickname is Poss, Poss. He's Big Poss, and I'm Little Poss. And Big Poss has been drinking Miller Lite since 1976. He's drank at least one a day since 1976. And when I was a little kid in Alabama, my dad used to send me to fetch beers for him and his boys. So most of the time I drink Miller Lite. I will drink Coors Light when I'm hanging out with Pepper, because Pepper drinks Coors Light. And I'll drink Coors Light with other people too. There's a couple other guys in the industry that they're big Silver Bullet fans. So I go back and forth between Coors Light and Miller Lite.
Cool. Well, now let's just chat a little bit about your Harley and the fact that you often ride that thing with your gear in your saddlebag.
Yes, sir. Well, I have been, since I started the company in 10, I try to go to as many classes as possible on my bike. Obviously, with weather, I mean, that's where the whole California thing comes in, right? If I lived in Southern California, I could ride year round pretty much all the time. But because I'm east of the Mississippi, we have to deal with rain and hurricanes and all that kind of shit. So I do about 15,000 miles a year on a bike. I am on my, give me a second here. 1, 2, 3. I think this is my 5th Harley. I ride a Dyna right now. It's a 2016 FXDL. It's a lowrider, but I kind of do the whole. I'm trying to, probably the easiest thing for the listener. It's the Ventura Hell's Angel kind of thing. The California Hell's Angel kind of set up just because, not because I'm a Hell's Angel, but because those guys kind of figured it out, man. So I go 1.5 inches over rear suspension, and I go 1.5 inches over in the front. So it's not really a low rider; it's technically a high rider at that point. Aftermarket suspension, front and rear. I put a steering stabilizer on it so my engine doesn't move side to side; it only moves front to back on the rubber mounts. I am a big fan of the company Biltwell. A buddy of mine, Bill Bryant, owns that with 2 other people. I run 10-inch Biltwell risers and Biltwell tracker handlebars, so I've got 12 inches of total rise off the tree. And again, that's just for comfort. Mid controls, so I'm kind of, I'm like a jockey when I'm on it. My feet are kind of underneath my ass. My handlebars are probably a little bit wider than shoulder width, but not much. And again, about 12 inches in the air. I run a small quarter fairing on the front from Memphis Shades, American made down there. I think they're in think they're in Memphis. They might be in Arkansas. I can't remember. I run saddlebags from a company called Leather Pros out of Wisconsin. They do a repop. It's a reproduction of the FX DXT saddlebag that Harley made on the Dyna from like 99 to like 05. And they quit making, in Harley's infinite wisdom, it was the best saddlebag they ever had. And of course, they quit making it. So this guy makes them. It's actually the largest saddlebag Harley's ever made, and it's a soft saddlebag. So those saddlebags will hold a 11.5-inch upper. Well, I shouldn't say that. It'll hold an 11.5-inch carbine without taking it apart.
Nice.
So I can put that in the saddlebag. With those two saddlebags, I can take, as many, I can be on the road forever. I can take enough clothes and enough guns that it's not a big deal. I can use ammo wise. I always carry my ammo on the tank bag. I use a tank bag from Biltwell. It's called the Xfil 11. Biltwell does all their luggage. If you see the Xfil 7, Xfil 11, Xfil 84, it's how many cans of beer that piece of luggage will hold. So, which I think is hilarious. So the Xfil 11 tank bag, I put my ammo on the tank because when we're in the curves, like in the mountains and stuff, and we're doing fast interstate riding, if your ammo is on the tank, you don't get any shift. Like, because your ammo, obviously 9mm especially, it's heavy as hell. So it's going all over the place if it's in a bag, a saddlebag. So I run that on the tank. What else do I have on there? I got to turn around and look at it. My exhaust is a Thrashing Supply, which is actually made by Musashi. I will never own. Let me rephrase that. I will only own a stainless steel exhaust the rest of my life. This is the first one I've ever had, and it's absolutely outstanding. Doesn't rust near the ocean. Yada yada. My seat is made by Saddlemen. Probably the best seat you can get for a Harley, in my opinion. Good lumbar support on the backside, good ass support. I mean, I can go tank to tank on this thing. Like, it is not a problem. What else? That's about it, man. I run my blinkers on the front. I replaced them with Custom Cycle Dynamics. It's a blinker, but it's actually when I don't have the turn signal on, it's actually another running light. So it looks like I have 3 headlights, which just helps visibility. Because when I'm riding, I get done with a civilian class, especially on like a Sunday. We get done Sunday night. Typically Monday morning, I've got to be at a military base to start another class, and it's rarely near where the open enrollment class was, which means I'm riding on the interstate at night, Sunday nights typically. So that helps out with visibility a lot, because I'm with the creatures of the night, typically past midnight on I-95 or 85 or whatever the hell I'm going up and down the East Coast. So that's kind of it right now, man. That's a good setup, and I know a lot of guys in the bike industry. I'm pretty good friends with the Indian Larry guys, pretty good friends with Atomic Trent, the Biltwell guys, Cruzy Originals out in Arizona. Those guys are super cool, very knowledgeable, and pretty much all of us run that Dyna setup. It's not really a bagger, but it's kind of like a bagger. I can't do a bagger, man. I just can't. They're too big. The fairings on the front are too big. The hard saddlebags on the rear. I lane split. Even though I don't live in California, in my mind, it's legal. So, you do not want to be lane splitting in New York City with hard saddlebags, because if a car catches your hard saddlebag, you're going to lose. But if it catches a soft saddlebag like a Leather Pro, you might give somebody a little bit of a rub, and it's no big deal. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what I roll with. And this is my second Dyna. My last Dyna, I put 75,000 miles on it, and I traded it in. Typically, Harley will take a trade in between 70 and 75,000. So I typically run them till about 70 grand, and then I trade them in just because it's very hard to get rid of them. Unless somebody knows what they're buying, This one I got now has got like 43 on it, so I'll probably get another year out of it, and I'll probably have to go to a Milwaukee 8, which, by the time I have to get a new bike, I think the Milwaukee 8 will have been out for 3 or 4 years. So hopefully by that point, Harley has unfucked everything in it.
Well, Kyle, real quick, what I want to say to the audience out there is that I will put the Ballistic Magazine video on our show notes so they can go check your bike out, because I mean it's a really cool video. It gives a lot of insight into Kyle's attitude towards his motorcycle, the combination of riding a bike and freedom along with the Second Amendment. It's a really good video, so I'll put that on there. And I'd like to also say that it's like, man, you got a way capable dude teaching people to be hard to kill on that bike, packing a serious carbine, all in that motorcycle. That's pretty badass.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's no other way to. I mean, people talk about freedom all the time, and it's like, bro, like the perfect vehicle to do it on. I mean, it is. I mean, I've been in love with motorcycles my whole life, and I almost died on one, which is another story. But had a real bad wreck before I came to the Navy. But behind my Harley right now, you guys don't know if the camera's on or not, but I just bought my son a pit bike, which is for like riding around the pit on a race. It's like a mini bike or whatever, but he's learning to ride on that because it's got a clutch and it's got, one down and four up. So even if he doesn't want to ride in his life, I think it's just a skill, you should at least be able to get on a bike and move it from, one parking spot to the other without looking like a complete moron. So, that's what he's doing right now.
Awesome.
Nice. Hey, Kyle, we just really want to thank you for coming on. It's been great. And, we're going to have you back. And with you, if you would share with us how people should contact you if they want to sign up for a class or see what's going on.
Don't contact me. Just, they can check out Instagram, Defoor-Proformance shooting. And it's Proformance. It's, purposely misspelled. It's not performance.
I like it.
So, that's just because I have a fucked
Nice.
sense of humor. And, from there, they can find everything. We've got a YouTube channel, Facebook. I can't even delete Facebook anymore. They won't even let me. I tried to. So Instagram, Facebook. The link to the website is on Instagram. So if you want to go on the website, check out. There's shooting tests on there. There's links to all my people, my tribe, my SIAC guys, partners, everybody that I either shoot for or I support their products. So yeah, it'll be more info than you ever want about me.
Right. And a list of about 20 sold out classes at the moment.
Well, hopefully.
However, Eric, there are spots for Maine right now.
Oh,
go
damn.
sign up.
Yeah, Maine's a good one, man. The Northman
Awesome.
helps me teach that. So he's a great fighter, man. So he helps me do the combatives.
Awesome. I'll jump on there and check that out.
Nice.
See if I can make it.
Nice. All right, man. Well, we will catch you next time.
All right, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Awesome interview with Kyle Defoor. Man, I really enjoyed what he had to say. I mean, just a super cool rock and roll American dude.
Yeah, man, incredible interview. And like I said and alluded to in the interview, man, Kyle Defoor has been influencing me and us for many, many years. It was such a pleasure to have him on the show, and we're looking forward to hosting him here pretty soon and starting to work with him more. So, man, that was a great interview. We're going to have him back again because we didn't get to hit on everything that we wanted to talk about. So we're going to have him back on.
Oh, yeah, and I remember when you turned me on to him, and here we are. We're going to go ahead and do our accountability for the week, but that's a guy that shows his accountability live on his recordings that he posts on YouTube. He'll post everything straight up live and, misses and all. So
Yeah.
he holds himself accountable for everybody. So he's legit for sure, man.
Yeah, and his standards are so high that that sometimes not everybody can meet him, and I know probably the majority of the time he meets his own standards. But he's got some of the highest standards there are in the industry, and I think he's been driving a lot of these measure-based classes that you're starting to see. I mean, it's obviously there's a lot of other instructors that do the same thing and have been doing it for many, many years, but Kyle certainly seemed to make a lot of that popular, especially shooting the B8 bull at speed. So, yeah, man, very cool.
Okay, Eric, so I'll just go ahead and get my accountability done here. This week I got one treadmill workout combined with dry fire, just a nice, good cardio session. And I threw in some crunches and push-ups in there too. Just a good all-around decent workout. You know, I don't do heavy workouts like you guys, just to be honest, but you know, I'm doing something, and I'm glad.
Most surely, man.
Sure. Now, what I dry fired, I did a little bit of pistol work with my dot, you know, still practicing acquiring that dot, but most of it, I grabbed my AR and I did what we talked about recently, which was dry firing the standing to kneeling and to prone positions. You know, that's just a great drill just to work on getting down into prone when you're not used to doing that. You know, it takes a little while. So that's what I worked on. Now, let's see here. I had a nice 20 or so minute dry fire session the other day where I worked about 15 minutes just on draws at a simulated 10 yards on an IDPA scaled down target. And then I spent about 5 minutes working on my strong hand only trigger presses. Again, one of the coolest things about the dot is that it teaches you where to place your finger on the trigger. I mean, that's just a great aspect of it. And it's really helping me with my strong hand only trigger presses. So just one little plug again for the red dot, since we've been talking about them quite a bit. And then tonight I did a quick dry fire session before we got rolling here. Working on my grip really hard and again, acquiring that dot as I get better and used to running that red dot. Now, I also had a nice little trip with my family this weekend. We went to Dallas and we took a little hike over to Ford Stadium where the Dallas Cowboys are stationed. And they have a cool little, probably about a half-size football field, turf football field out in the front of the stadium. We spent about, hour and a half, 2 hours tossing the football back and forth. So that was a lot of fun. And a couple of last things here. I finished on the education subject. I finished 2 guitar distortion pedals that I've been working on for about a month. One of them I finished up from scratch. It was a version of the Eternity Overdrive pedal. Man, I did that really from scratch, researching the parts, components, and drilling the enclosure, painting it with primer, and then painting it with a cool paint job. And then, of course, planning the wiring layout to cram all that stuff in that little enclosure. Boy, that was a hard task.
Nice.
And then I did one more pedal pedal called a VFE Alpha Dog. It's a really cool version of the Rat distortion pedal. I wanted to modify that for a little bit more distortion, so I reached out to the owner of VFE and asked him his suggestion on modifying that pedal. Well, I dug in and started modifying that and just really kept heating up the board too much, Eric. You know what I'm talking about, man. I was heating up that board and couldn't get the solder out of the holes in it. So I decided that I would reach out to him and get a brand new board. And so he sent me that, and I rebuilt that whole thing. And it finally came together. And man, as much work as I put into that, and I'm just a paint by numbers solder junkie here. But when I fired that thing up and it ran perfect right off the bat, that was pretty rewarding. So
that's awesome, man. I'm proud of you on that. That's pretty cool.
You don't need to read schematics to do these kinds of projects, but I've been getting into that a little bit so I can, because that one overdrive pedal I put together, now I'm wanting to modify it a little bit because it's not exactly how I wanted it. So to do that, I need to dig into the schematic on it. So I was working on that too, which is a good little bit of education. Now, Eric, I'm going to put you on the spot right now, bro. What pistol do you have on you right now? It has to be on you.
It is my Glock 19 in a Velo 4, man.
So it's on you. Prove it. Prove it.
1 second here.
All right, bro. I see it. So now I'm not perfect about carrying around the house, but here is my little Glock 42 in my Spencer Keeper's errand. When I'm around the house, I carry that. Now, that's maybe a good point. Now, again, I'm not perfect about carrying around the house all the time, every day, but most of the time, every day, I have that on me. Now, some people might think, hey, maybe that's a little too far. You know, to each his own. But you know what? There's some shows that, man, there's another great show called, let's see here, what's it called? Dang it, I'm forgetting the name of it. But it's a great show about self-defense stories. Yeah, it's called Self-Defense Gun Stories. And they have a saying on there. They call it POGO, pants on, gun on. So
Nice.
you don't know if someone kicks in the door and you would have to run across the house to get a pistol. So yeah, I keep one on me, and I just felt like putting you on the spot, bro, and you did disappoint.
Nice, and I will tell you, I don't carry my 19 around the house all the time, but sometimes it's what I put on because I would rather have my 19 if I need it. But yeah, so that just happens to be what I was carrying tonight. So
Cool,
very cool.
Hey, and you just sent me a picture of your new studio there, and I did notice an AR there in the corner up against the wall. And I just have to say, bro, I've got my carbine up against the wall here too.
Nice.
Someone would make a bad choice to try and get in this house tonight. So,
Yep, same here. Yeah, I mean, just sometimes, man, just since we're on the subject, pistol's great, but an AR is a hell of a lot better. And so I like to have a carbine around the house when I can, and I do. So,
well,
very good
again,
point.
we got to make it real clear. Shy of the blast, the AR-15 is well known now as the safest indoors compared to a pistol, right?
Yep.
And it's easier for more people to run. So, in my opinion, it's the perfect home defense gun. But maybe other people disagree. But I know the shotgun's great too. But not everybody is comfortable running a 12 gauge. So that's all I got to say about that, bro. You got your accountability?
Sure do. I'll start with jiu-jitsu. Of course, I said at the intro that I started a new gym this week, so it was great to be there. I only got to be there once. That's just the way that it shook out. I did have 3 workouts this week, 2 of them early morning. So I'm just going to stop a second there and talk about how wonderful it is to be in my new home with my home gym. I absolutely love that gym. I mean, I get so much done in there, and I never get bored in there. I've got so many implements and workout utilities that, man, I'm never bored. So this week,
Awesome.
Yeah, man, it's great to have. I'm blessed for sure. I focused on chins. Been trying to get my chins back up near my max that I had this last summer. Overhead press, barbell cleans, dips. One of my workouts was just kettlebells only, doing kettlebell snatches, kettlebell cleans, goblet squats, Turkish get-ups, and I will tell you that I hadn't done that in a long time with just kettlebells. I will tell you that I am smoked sore from that workout. So kind of cool, man.
Turkish get-ups with the kettlebell?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Rock on.
Yeah, and those workouts I was running my 53-pound kettlebell, so man, I was smoked. So, moving on, as far as my dry fire goes, Aaron, I focused on transitions this week with my pistol on my scaled down IDPA targets. I felt like I've been neglecting transitions between targets because we do focus a lot more on single target drills if we're not competing. So I thought I'd pick up the pace on that. On carbine, I decided one focus as well. So I emulated starting from about 7 all the way out to 25 yards. Cool. And I just did up drills from the low ready and also the high ready, keeping a par time of 1 second all the way out to the 25 mark, a second and a half on the high ready. So I'm going to say that I didn't make all those second and a half. That's a little tough to go from the high ready and press in the shoulder, but I got it several times.
Cool.
So that was my dry fire. So a little bit of change in accountability for me this week. One of the things that I did, just a little side story that we've talked about before, Brian and I met at a ham radio license test. So that's something that we are both still very serious about because we got into it for emergency's sake, to be able to communicate during disasters and possibly during hard times, if that ever happens. But so I built a 40-meter delta loop, a full loop antenna, and I've got it in my trees. The apex, it's just like a delta being a triangle. The apex is at about 65 feet up in the trees. I had to use a slingshot and a fish weight to get my my rope over it. So put the apex up there, and then the bottom base of the triangle is about 12 or so feet in the air. So that was a lot of fun. My wife helped me with that a little bit. And man, that antenna performs amazing. I cannot believe how awesome it performs.
Superb.
So I made some contacts. In ham radio, you call CQ if you're just trying to look for people to talk to. And normally with my other rig back in Washington, I'd call CQ 10, 20 times before I'd get somebody to come back. This antenna, probably about every maybe 2 or 3 times, and I got somebody coming back, and then they just pile up.
Cool.
So in fact, I talked with a gentleman in Oklahoma, my first contact on that radio.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I spoke with several people in Kansas and New York, and then I talked with a guy down in Brazil. So,
wow.
Yeah, so it's amazing what you can do and it's a wire antenna, 14 gauge wire, and fed with about 100 watts. So kind of fun.
Yeah.
Lastly, I set up my drums in my studio here. Man, it's amazing to get that done. It's time to get on some new EvoSec tactical twin music, isn't it?
It sure is. I've been writing some riffs. When I come up with ideas, man, one of the coolest things to use is simply put your iPhone in front of your guitar speaker and record an idea and maybe narrate it a little bit. Nothing better for songwriting, in my opinion, than just a simple recorder. So, because you can use it anytime you have an idea. So, yeah, man, and of course, those drums are killer, so I like seeing that pic of your studio this evening.
Awesome. Well, man, I think that's about it for the week. Do you want me to prescribe the drill of the week?
Man, rock on, do it.
So, because of our awesome guest, Kyle Defoor of Defoor-Proformance, Proformance, that is, we're going to shoot his pistol test 1. This is on an IPSC target with a NRA B8 bull repair center. It's aligned with the bottom edge of the C zone, so it covers about half of the A zone. Starting with hands on target, run to the 25-yard line, draw and fire 6 rounds at bullseye in 30 seconds. It's 50 points to pass. Then you'll go to the 6-yard line. You draw and fire 1 round into the reduced A zone in 2 seconds. 6-yard line again, draw and fire 6 rounds into the reduced A zone in 4.5 seconds. Again, 6-yard line, fire 2 rounds into the upper A zone head box. So it's got to be in the box in 3.5 seconds. So all rounds must be in the A zone to pass. All rounds must be fired under par time to pass. What do you think about that one, Aaron?
Well, I'm looking forward to trying it out. Sounds pretty tough.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I've been able to pass it before, but I haven't shot it in recent time. And I'm not going to lie, my vision isn't as good as the times that I've shot it before. So we'll see how it goes.
Cool.
Well, with that said, man, what do you think we go ahead and call it a night?
Sounds good, buddy. Again, we missed Brian, but we'll have him catch up on accountability next time. So, yeah, Eric, you have a good night, brother.
You too, buddy. Take care.